Security cameras. They're supposed to be for our protection, watching over us when we're at our most vulnerable. But what happens when the very thing meant to keep you safe becomes a silent witness to something terrifying when the world is asleep? The night shift is on the clock, and the cameras, they just keep rolling. Sometimes they capture the things that prefer to lurk in the dark, from bizarre break-ins at retail stores to shocking discoveries in quiet hospitals. These are 8 true workplace stories, all caught on security cameras. Story 1, The Phantom of the Pharmacy. Our first story takes us to Jacksonville, Florida, where a local pharmacy became the target of a destructive and just plain weird break-in. It was around 4 a.m. on a Monday in July 2019 when the building's security system was triggered. The owner, Kevin Duane, was alerted and would later watch the footage, only to uncover something far more baffling than a simple robbery. The video starts with the grainy image of a figure walking up to the side of the building. They're wearing dark clothes, a tan mask, and bright yellow gloves. But it's what they're carrying that sets the tone: a sledgehammer and an axe. Instead of trying to jimmy a door or smash a window, this person had a much more brutal plan. They walk right up to a solid exterior wall and just start hacking at it with the axe, carving out a crude opening. Once the hole is big enough, they switch to the sledgehammer, smashing away chunks of the building until they've made a man-sized gap. The whole entry took 9 relentless minutes. After crawling through the hole they just made, the intruder is caught on the interior cameras. They move with a frantic, chaotic energy, not really targeting any one thing. They're just grabbing whatever they can: entire trays of medication, syringes from the shelves, even bags of diabetic products. Maybe the most disturbing part is that they snatched prescription bottles that were already filled and waiting for specific patients to pick them up. But they weren't done. The intruder is then seen smashing up interior walls and a mirror, knocking over shelves, and leaving a total wreck in their wake. The owner later told news reporters that when he walked in, it looked like a bomb had gone off. The pharmacy was so badly damaged, it had to shut down for a day and a half to clean up and repair everything. What makes this so unsettling isn't just the theft, it's the aggression and the bizarre way they got in. Why not just break a window? Why bring an axe and a sledgehammer to tear through a solid wall? The footage shows a level of desperation that feels deeply unhinged, more about causing chaos than pulling off a clean theft. The police were called, but the phantom was long gone, leaving behind total devastation and a video showing just how vulnerable a workplace can be in the middle of the night. For our next story, we're staying in a place of healing, but the horror doesn't come from an outside intruder. It comes from a shocking betrayal from within, and it's about what happens when the tools meant for safety are turned against the very people they're supposed to protect. Story 2, The Unseen Surgeons. Between July 2012 and June 2013, something awful was happening inside the Women's Health Center at Sharp Grossmont Hospital in La Mesa, California. In 3 different operating rooms, hidden cameras were secretly recording patients. For nearly a year, an estimated 1,800 women were filmed during their most vulnerable moments while giving birth by C-section, undergoing hysterectomies, or being treated after a miscarriage. The hospital's official reason for the cameras was to catch a thief. They thought an employee might be stealing the anesthetic drug, propofol, from carts in the operating rooms, so they installed motion-activated cameras to catch them. The problem was, these cameras were hidden inside the monitors on the anesthesia carts, and they captured not only the carts but also the operating tables and the patients on them. The cameras would start at recording anytime they sensed movement, filming everything from surgeons operating to patients being prepped for surgery. In some clips, Patients' faces were clearly visible, and their most private areas were exposed. The system ended up capturing over 6,900 video clips. The real horror, however, goes beyond just the recording. According to the lawsuit that followed, the way the hospital managed the footage was a complete disaster. The videos were apparently stored on desktop computers that weren't always password protected, meaning anyone from medical staff to other employees could have potentially seen them. There were no logs to track who watched the videos or why. For years, the 1-800 patients had no idea. The story only started coming out in 2016 when the first patients were notified. Why? Because their videos had been handed over as part of a medical board proceeding against a doctor. Imagine getting a letter telling you that a video of your surgery was recorded without your consent and was now being used as evidence. This led to a massive class action lawsuit, with more than 80 women joining in. Their legal filings described feelings of shock, humiliation, and utter powerlessness. The lawsuit also brought up a terrifying question: where was all the footage? The hospital said it destroyed many of the files, but couldn't confirm when, how, or if they were securely erased. The thought that these intimate recordings could still be out there somewhere, on an old hard drive or a forgotten server, just made the trauma worse for the victims. This was a catastrophic failure of privacy and trust, where the cameras, meant to catch a petty thief, ended up creating a permanent, nightmarish record of thousands of women's vulnerability. From the sterile quiet of a hospital to the echoing space of a warehouse, the night shift often means you're one of just a few people in a massive building. But as our next story shows, sometimes you're not as alone as you think. This account, shared by a security guard online, reveals how a threat can be hiding in plain sight. Story 3. The sabotage signals. Warehouses are hives of activity by day, but at night they fall silent, left in the care of a skeleton crew and CCTV cameras. For one night shift guard, the job was simple: watch the monitors, do your rounds, and make sure the building stays quiet. But one night, that silence was a lie. The guard was doing his usual remote patrol from the security office, scanning a bank of monitors that each showed a different part of the enormous building. Everything looked normal. Then he noticed something weird. Camera 12, which covered a high-value electronics section, was frozen. Not black, not static, just stuck on a perfect, still image of an empty aisle. Even the timestamp in the corner was frozen. He figured it was a glitch, rebooted the feed, but nothing happened. Annoyed, he made a note for the maintenance team and moved on. An hour later, during his physical patrol, he walked past the area covered by camera 12. Nothing seemed out of place. Back in the office, he saw the feed was magically working again. He just chalked it up to a network lag. The next night, it happened again. This time, it was camera 4 pointed at the pharmaceutical storage. Another perfect, frozen image. This was too much of a coincidence. He immediately went to check it out. As he got closer, he heard a faint scuttling sound from the end of the aisle. He shone his flashlight down the long corridor, but saw nothing. Still, he found a small scuff mark on the floor, like something had been dragged and then carefully pushed back. A chill went down his spine. This wasn't a glitch. He raced back to the office and pulled up the archived footage from the night before. He dug into the server logs for camera 12, and his blood ran cold. Right before the feed froze, the camera caught a flicker of movement, a shadowy figure moving low and fast. And at the exact moment, the feed cut to the still image. The logs showed an unauthorized remote login from an internal IP address, one assigned to a daytime inventory clerk. Someone wasn't breaking in. They were already inside the system. They were using a loop recording, a pre-recorded clip to hide what they were doing. He realized the intruders were probably still in the building, thinking they were invisible. He immediately called the police and his supervisor, then locked himself in the security office, his heart pounding as he watched the working cameras. The investigation uncovered a sophisticated internal theft ring. A group of daytime employees had found a weakness in the camera network. They used their own credentials to loop the feeds in certain areas, while their accomplices, who hid in the warehouse after hours, stole merchandise. They were only caught because one night guard noticed the tiny detail of a frozen timestamp. The cameras the thieves thought they were controlling ended up being their downfall. A late-night diner is supposed to be a safe place, a beacon of light for weary travelers or third-shift workers. But for the staff at one Cincinnati McDonald's, that safe space was shattered, and the security cameras captured every terrifying moment. Story 4, the freezer in the kitchen. It was about 4 a.m. on a December morning in 2017. The pre-dawn quiet at a McDonald's on Winton Road was broken when two men forced their way into the building. They weren't there for a McMuffin. The restaurant's security cameras show them masked, dressed in black, and both carrying handguns. There were 3 employees on staff, just trying to make it through their shift. The footage is chilling. With no audio, you can only see the raw fear in the workers' body language as the gunmen confront them. The intruders weren't yelling. They just pointed their weapons down a hallway, ordering the terrified employees to start walking. They herded the 3 workers through the kitchen. Their movements were calm, deliberate, and unhurried, suggesting they knew the layout of the store. Their destination, the walk-in freezer. The cameras caught the horrifying moment the employees were forced inside the freezing cold box. The door slammed shut, leaving them in complete darkness, with no idea if the armed men were coming back. With the staff out of the way, the 2 men went for their target, the restaurant's safe. The video shows them emptying it of all the cash. But what's really strange is what happened next. After getting the money, the men just vanished into the night, leaving the employees locked in the freezer. It wasn't until a manager arrived for the morning shift that anyone knew something was wrong. The store was eerily empty. She was searching the back when she heard a faint pounding sound coming from the walk-in freezer. She opened it to find the 3 employees shaken, freezing, but alive. When police reviewed the security footage, the crime was all there in black and white. But the casual cruelty of locking people in a freezer seemed like an act of psychological terror that went far beyond a simple robbery. That extra step is what made the crime so scarring for everyone involved. The footage became the key piece of evidence, a silent recording of a night when the familiar golden arches became the backdrop for a hostage situation. The stories we've heard so far are about physical threats in a specific place, but our next story is about a breach that happened everywhere, all at once, a single failure that exposed the private lives of thousands and proved that the camera in your workplace can become a window for unseen eyes thousands of miles away. Story 5, the all-seeing cloud. In March of 2021, the Silicon Valley security startup Verkada had a security breach of epic proportions. Verkada sold cloud-based camera systems to thousands of clients, promising that their platform was more secure than traditional recorders. Their customers included hospitals, women's health clinics, schools, police departments, prisons, and even major companies like Tesla. The breach wasn't some complex cyber attack. It was shockingly simple. An international hacker collective got access by using a super admin username and password they found posted publicly on the internet. With those master keys, they logged into Verkada's system and got godlike access. They could see into over 150,000 security cameras. Suddenly, the hackers had a live window into a police station in Massachusetts. They could peer into a jail in Alabama. They watched inside a hospital in Florida. They saw factory floors at Tesla. The scope was breathtaking. Every single workplace that trusted Verkada was now completely exposed. The hackers, led by an individual named Tilly Cotman, said they did it to show the world the dangers of mass surveillance and how easily these systems can be broken. To prove their point, they shared images with the media. One showed workers on a Tesla assembly line. Another showed hospital staff restraining a patient on a bed. They had access to everything. For any night shift worker, this is terrifying. An employee working late in an empty office, a nurse tending to a patient, a guard watching a silent building, all of them could have been watched by anonymous hackers. The very system meant to protect them from physical threats had become the source of a massive digital one. Even crazier. Verkada had no idea they'd been breached until the hackers contacted the media themselves. For 2 full days, the hackers had a free pass to peer into some of the most sensitive places imaginable. The fallout was huge, triggering federal investigations and a multi-million-dollar penalty for the company. But the real damage was to the feeling of safety for every single person who had ever walked in front of one of those cameras. It's a horrifying lesson. When you connect a camera to the cloud, you might not just be creating a record for yourself, you might be creating a live feed for the whole world. Working the night shift in a hospital often means dealing with people in distress. But for one healthcare worker, that distress turned into a violent, life-altering assault. Her story shows just how vulnerable caregivers are and how security cameras can become the only witness to shocking brutality. Story 6, The Watcher in the Ward. In the early morning hours at Advocate Good Samaritan Hospital in Illinois, 64-year-old Sandra Gatlin was doing her job. She was a crisis therapist in the emergency room, assigned to an agitated psychiatric patient. Her job was to be a calming presence and keep everyone safe. Security camera footage from the hallway, and a warning. It is difficult to watch shows the moment the situation exploded. Though the video is silent, the violence is clear. Gatlin is working with the patient when he suddenly lashes out, shoving her so hard she's knocked completely off her feet. As she falls, her head hits the hard floor with an audible crack. What happens next is horrifying. The patient gets on top of the stunned therapist and just starts pummeling her with his fists over and over. For what feels like an eternity, the brutal attack continues with no one around to stop it. The camera just dispassionately records the assault. Finally, other hospital staff rush in to pull the man off her, but the damage was already done. Sandra Gatlin's injuries were catastrophic. Her skull was crushed, requiring staples to close the wound. She suffered multiple brain bleeds and 2 fractures in her spine. Her daughter later said they were still discovering new injuries. The attack left her with panic attacks and a long, painful road to recovery. And this wasn't an isolated incident. At another hospital, Baylor University Medical Center, a 76-year-old employee was assigned to watch over a 30-year-old male patient during the night shift. At some point, the patient became violent and punched the elderly woman in the face more than a dozen times until she was unconscious. She was left with severe injuries and required surgery. In both cases, the security camera footage was the silent, undeniable witness. It provided irrefutable proof of these unprovoked, brutal attacks. It captured the raw reality of the dangers healthcare workers face, especially on the night shift when staffing is low and hallways are quiet. These cameras often end up as a grim archive of workplace trauma, recording the moments that change lives forever. Working alone on the night shift makes you uniquely vulnerable. In a large, empty building, any sound can feel like a threat. This next story, shared by a security guard, is about a strange discovery on his monitors that led to a confrontation that was both terrifying and tragic. Story 7. The figure in the parking garage. They say being a night security guard is long periods of boredom punctuated by moments of sheer terror. For a guard named Mark,
in
patrolling
the early
a
morning
high-end
hours
residential
at
building
Advocate Good Samaritan
that was about to
Hospital
become
in Illinois,
very real.
64-year-old
He was at his desk in the
Sandra
lobby,
Gatlin
surrounded by
was doing her
CCTV
job.
monitors
She was
showing
a
empty
crisis
hallways,
therapist
silent
in the
elevators,
emergency room,
and the shadowy parking
assigned
garage.
to an agitated
Around 2
psychiatric
a.m.,
patient. Her job was to be
he
a
noticed the
calming
feed for stairwell
presence
B,
and keep
a
everyone
concrete
safe.
shaft that was rarely
Security
used,
camera
had gone
footage
completely
from the
black.
hallway and a warning.
A few minutes
It
later,
is difficult
the
to
feed
watch
for camera
shows
7
the
on the floor
moment the
above
situation
also went
exploded.
black. This wasn't a
Though
coincidence.
the video is silent,
2
the
cameras
violence
in the
is
same stairwell,
clear.
failing one after
Gatlin
another.
is working with the patient when he
It felt
suddenly lashes
intentional.
out, shoving
Mark
her
felt
so
a knot of
hard
anxiety.
she's knocked completely
Disabling cameras
off
isn't
her
a prank.
feet.
It
As
suggests
she
a level of
falls,
planning
her head hits
that's
the
deeply
hard
unsettling.
floor with an
He
audible
called his
crack.
partner,
What
George,
happens next
who was on
is
patrol,
horrifying.
and told him to
The
stay
patient
away
gets on
from that
top of
stairwell.
the stunned therapist
Mark just wanted to
and
watch.
just starts pummeling
10 minutes
her with
later,
his fists
the
over
feed from
and
camera 7
over.
flickered back to
For what
life.
feels like an
The image
eternity,
was perfect.
the brutal attack
Mark zoomed in.
continues with no
He was a
one
meticulous
around
guard
to stop it.
and had remembered
The
seeing a small
camera just
smudge on that camera's
dispassionately
housing earlier
records
in the
the
week.
assault.
The smudge
Finally,
was gone.
other hospital
The lens
staff
had been
rush
wiped
in
clean.
to pull the man
His
off
heart
her,
started pounding.
but the damage
Someone
was
had been
already
there.
done.
He
Sandra
radioed George to
Gatlin's
come back to the
injuries
desk.
were catastrophic.
As he was
Her
explaining,
skull was
the
crushed,
camera covering the parking
requiring
garage
staples
entrance
to
to
close
that same
the
stairwell
wound.
suddenly reactivated.
She suffered
And there,
multiple brain bleeds
standing in the
and
harsh
2
fluorescent
fractures
light,
in her spine.
was a man.
Her daughter
He was
later
tall,
said
thin,
they were still
and definitely
discovering
not a
new
resident.
injuries.
But what the
The
man did
attack
next
left her with
is what really
panic
terrified
attacks
Mark.
and a long,
He slowly
painful
lifted his
road
head
to recovery.
and looked directly into the camera
And
lens.
this wasn't an
There was no
isolated
surprise,
incident.
no fear of
At
being
another
caught.
hospital,
It was a
Baylor
look of
University Medical Center, a
intelligent
76-year-old employee
He knew
was
where the camera
assigned
was.
to watch over a 30-year-old
he was
male
being
patient
watched.
during the night
Then,
shift.
He slowly
At
raised one
some
hand
point, the
and gave a
patient
small,
became
deliberate
violent
wave.
and punched the elderly
wasn't a
woman
friendly
in the
wave.
face more than
was a
a
wave that
dozen
said,
times until
"I
she
see
was
you,
unconscious. She
Mark
was left with
immediately
severe
called the
injuries
police.
and required surgery.
While he was on the phone,
In
the
both
man on the
cases,
screen turned
the security
and walked
camera
back into
footage
the
was
stairwell,
the silent, undeniable
disappearing.
witness. It provided
The police arrived
irrefutable
and found him
proof
huddled
of
in a
these
dark corner of the
unprovoked,
stairwell.
brutal attacks.
The man's story was both
It
strange
captured the raw
and
reality
sad.
of the
He
dangers
wasn't a
healthcare
thief.
workers face.
He was homeless.
Especially on the night
For
shift
weeks,
when staffing
he had
is
been
low and
meticulously
hallways
observing
are
the building,
quiet.
mapping out the guards'
These
patrol
cameras
routes,
often
the timing,
end up as
and the
a
blind
grim
spots
archive
of every single camera.
workplace trauma, recording the
He figured out
moments
how to disable
that
the feeds
change
from a hidden
lives
junction box,
forever.
all so he could get
Working
a
alone
few
on the
hours of
night
safe,
shift makes
warm,
you
and
uniquely
uninterrupted sleep.
vulnerable.
The police
In a
took him
large,
away
empty
peacefully,
building, any
for
sound
Mark,
can feel
the
like a
incident
threat.
left
This
a
next
permanent
story,
scar.
shared by
His
a
fortress of
security
technology
guard,
had
is
been
about
silently
a
defeated
strange
by one
discovery
desperate
on his
man
monitors
looking for
that
shelter.
led to a
The
confrontation
phantom
that was
of
both
stairwell B was
terrifying
gone,
and
but he
tragic.
left behind a chilling truth. The feeling of being secure is often just an illusion. For our final story, we return to a hospital, a place of ultimate vulnerability. It involves an employee who used his position to commit an unthinkable crime, with the security camera system becoming the tool that both enabled his crimes and ultimately led to his downfall. Story 8. The Spy in the Sleep Center. Patients at the sleep centers associated with Northwell Health in New York were there for care and privacy. They were undergoing overnight evaluations, placing their trust in the healthcare system. That trust was systematically betrayed by a part-time employee named David Beamond. Between 2022 and 2023, Bement allegedly carried out a sinister operation. He worked as a sleep lab technologist, a job that gave him access to patient areas. He reportedly used that access to install hidden cameras inside fake smoke detectors, and he placed these devices in the most private spaces, imaginable public bathrooms and changing areas in 2 different health facilities. The cameras were positioned to capture video of patients when they were completely exposed. And according to investigators, they recorded numerous patients over a long period, including both adults and children. Bement was secretly amassing a collection of footage, turning a place of healing into his own private surveillance network. He twisted the very purpose of a sleep center to observe patients into a horrifying act of voyeurism. The discovery of his crimes led to his arrest and a sprawling investigation that sent shockwaves through the community. How could an employee install and operate illicit recording devices for so long without anyone noticing? In this case, the cameras were the crime. They were the weapons. When the investigation began, the devices and the footage on them became the central evidence. The horror deepened when it was revealed that Bement had allegedly tried to destroy that evidence by throwing away SD cards. But investigators recovered them from dumpsters, and forensic analysis of those files provided the digital fingerprints that would lead to his prosecution. This story is a unique kind of workplace horror. The threat wasn't a violent intruder, but a trusted insider who exploited his position. For the staff who worked alongside him and the hundreds of patients who passed through those doors, the revelation was a nightmare. It proved that sometimes the monster isn't trying to get in. He's already there, wearing a uniform and a smile, watching from a place you'd never think to look. The night shift is its own world, a time of quiet hallways, empty offices, and humming machines. A time when the only thing watching is the silent, unblinking lens of a security camera. As these stories show, sometimes that lens captures more than just an empty room. It captures our deepest fears, the violent intruder, the unseen watcher, and the ultimate betrayal of trust. It's a reminder that even in our modern, secure workplaces, when the lights go out, we can never be entirely sure that we are truly alone. If you found these stories compelling, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more. And if you've ever worked a night shift and seen something you can't explain, we'd love to hear from you. Share your experience in the comments below, or submit your story to the email in the description. You never know, your story might be in our next video. Stay safe out there.